Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The rain had been falling for hours, a steady, drumming rhythm against the roof and windows that usually soothed me. But that afternoon, it felt different. It mirrored the restless tapping inside my own chest. David, my husband, had been gone nearly 3 years now, and while the sharpest edges of grief had softened, loneliness still visited, especially on days like this, trapped indoors with only the gray light and the sound of the storm for company. I was curled up on the sofa, pretending to read a novel, but mostly just staring out at the drenched garden, the roses drooping under the weight of the water. The house felt too big, too quiet. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, echoing with memories and unspoken thoughts. I missed the easy companionship, the comfortable silences that weren't empty, the feeling of simply not being alone in the space. I sighed, pushing a stray strand of hair back from my face. At 52, I felt caught somewhere between chapters of my own life, unsure of what the next one held. The kids were grown and gone, living their own busy lives, and while I was proud of them, their absence carved another layer of quiet into my days. Then a knock, not loud, not demanding, but definite. It startled me. Visitors were rare, especially on a miserable Tuesday afternoon. My first thought was maybe it was Carol from next door, needing to borrow something, but the knock came again, a little firmer this time. I put my book down, my heart doing a funny little flip-flop, partly curiosity, partly a strange, unfounded apprehension. I walked to the door, smoothing down my sweater, and peered through the peephole. It wasn't Carol. It was Mark. Mark Harrison from 2 houses down. I didn't know him well. We'd exchanged polite waves over the years, the occasional brief chat about the weather or neighborhood happenings while grabbing the mail. He was a quiet man, kept to himself mostly. Probably around my age, maybe a bit older. He'd lived there longer than David, and I had, always alone as far as I knew. He looked drenched. Rain plastered his graying hair to his forehead, dripping from the brim of the old baseball cap he wore low over his eyes. His shoulders were slumped, and he held something small and metallic in his hand, turning it over and over. He wasn't looking at the door, but down at his feet, standing shifting slightly on my welcome mat, which probably felt like a sponge by now. Hesitantly, I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door a crack, the safety chain still on. "Mark, is everything all right?" My voice sounded rusty, unused. He looked up, startled, as if he hadn't really expected anyone to answer. His eyes, usually a clear blue, looked troubled, clouded over like the sky. Rainwater trickled down his cheeks, mingling with what might have been something else. It was hard to tell in the dim, rainy light. "Oh, hello, Eleanor," he said, his voice low and rough. He cleared his throat. "Sorry to bother you. Really sorry. It's just, well, this is embarrassing." He held up the object in his hand. It was a key, a house key, snapped clean in two. "Locked myself out," he mumbled, looking back down at the broken key. "Phone's inside. Wallet's inside. And, well, I snapped the key trying to jiggle the lock. Stupid, I know." He attempted a small, self-deprecating smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. There was a vulnerability in his posture, in the way he avoided my gaze, that tugged at something in me. He looked utterly lost and miserable, standing there in the downpour. "Oh, Mark, that's terrible," I said, sliding the chain off and opening the door wider. Come in out of this rain before you catch your death." He hesitated for a moment, looking back towards his own dark house down the street, as if unsure. "I don't want to impose," he started, rain dripping from his chin. "Nonsense. I insisted, stepping back. Get yourself inside. We'll figure something out. You can use my phone, call a locksmith. He finally stepped over the threshold, bringing the scent of rain and damp earth into my hallway. He stood awkwardly on the mat, dripping onto the tile, clutching the broken key pieces like evidence of his folly. He looked smaller indoors, somehow diminished without the vast, stormy backdrop. His usual quiet reserve seemed replaced by a raw sort of weariness. "Thank you, Eleanor," he said, finally meeting my eyes properly. There was a depth of exhaustion there that went beyond just being locked out in the rain. It was unsettling and oddly compelling. I felt a flicker of something beyond simple neighborly concern. It was empathy, sharp and sudden. I knew what it felt like to be adrift, even if the circumstances were different. The quiet house suddenly felt less empty, charged with his unexpected presence. I closed the door, shutting out the roar of the rain, leaving just the sound of Mark's damp jacket shedding water onto the mat and the unsteady rhythm of my own breathing. "Let me get you a towel," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and welcoming, pushing down the strange flutter of nerves. "And maybe some coffee or tea." He ran a hand over his wet hair, dislodging his cap, revealing more gray than I'd realized. "Coffee would be wonderful. Thank you, if it's not too much trouble." He spoke quietly, almost apologetically. "No trouble at all," I assured him, heading towards the kitchen. "Make yourself comfortable. Well, as comfortable as you can be soaking wet." I glanced back and saw him still standing by the door, looking uncertain, like he wasn't sure where to put himself. There was a story behind those troubled eyes. I was sure of it now. Something more than just a broken key. And a part of me, the part that had felt dormant for so long, felt a surprising, tentative curiosity about what that story might be. The rain continued its relentless drumming outside, but inside, the silence had shifted. It was no longer empty. It was filled with a quiet, uncertain potential. He'd shed his wet jacket, hanging it carefully on the hook by the door after I insisted, and was now sitting stiffly on the edge of the armchair nearest the window, nursing the mug of coffee I'd made him. He'd used the towel I gave him to dry his hair and face, but his clothes were still damp, and he seemed hesitant to lean back against the fabric of the chair. I sat on the sofa opposite him, cradling my own mug, the novel forgotten on the cushion beside me. The initial awkwardness lingered, punctuated by the clink of his mug against the saucer and the relentless patter of rain. He'd thanked me again for the coffee, his gaze drifting towards the window, towards his own house, barely visible through the watery curtain. "Did you want to call a locksmith now?" I asked gently, breaking the silence. "I can look one up for you." He shook his head slowly, still staring out the window. "Not yet. Maybe I'll just wait a bit. See if the rain lets up." His voice was still low, tinged with that same weariness I'd noticed at the door. It wasn't the response I expected. Most people would be anxious to get back into their house. His reluctance felt significant. "Are you sure?" I pressed lightly. It could take them a while to get here in this weather. He finally turned his gaze back to me. The troubled look was still there, maybe even more pronounced now that he was out of the elements. "It's all right, Eleanor. Honestly, there's nothing urgent waiting for me in there." He said it quietly, but the words hung in the air, heavy with implication. It felt like a confession, veiled though it was. My own experiences with grief and loneliness echoed in his tone. I recognized the feeling of a house that was just walls and furniture, not necessarily a refuge. I decided not to push the locksmith issue. Instead, I took a sip of my coffee and tried a different approach. "Nasty weather," I offered, stating the obvious. Seems like it settled in for the day. He nodded, tracing the rim of his mug with a finger. It does. Figures. Today of all days. Oh, I kept my tone light, inviting but not demanding. He hesitated, looking down into his coffee, as if the swirling cream held some answer. It would have been my anniversary today, he said, so softly I almost didn't catch it. My wedding anniversary. The air thickened. Suddenly, his presence, his reluctance, his damp clothes, and his troubled eyes snapped into focus. This wasn't just about a broken key. Oh, Mark, I breathed, my own chest tightening with empathy. I'm so sorry. I didn't know that you were married. He managed a faint, sad smile. Was a long time ago. Clara, she passed away. 15 years now. 15 years. He'd been alone in that house down the street, carrying that loss for 15 years. I'd lived here for 10 of those, completely oblivious, exchanging pleasantries over the fence, never guessing the depth of history and sorrow behind his quiet demeanor. I had no idea, I said sincerely. That must be incredibly difficult, especially today. He nodded, looking away again, but this time it felt less like avoidance and more like introspection. Some years are harder than others. This year feels heavy. I was going to visit her at the cemetery, but the rain, and then this stupid key. He shook his head, frustration and sadness warring on his face. It just felt like the last straw, you know? I did know. I knew about anniversaries that punched the air out of your lungs. I knew about days when simple frustrations felt like insurmountable obstacles because they were piled on top of a grief that never truly disappeared. I do know, I said quietly. My husband, David, it's been almost 3 years for me. Mark looked up, his eyes widening slightly in surprise, then softening with understanding. Oh, Eleanor, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. A fragile bridge of shared experience formed between us in that moment, spanning the space between the sofa and the armchair. We were two people in the same quiet neighborhood, living parallel lives marked by loss, unaware of the common ground beneath our feet until a broken key and a rainy Tuesday brought us together. It's okay, I assured him. It's part of life, isn't it? Learning to navigate the anniversaries, the quiet days. He held my gaze for a long moment, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. The air no longer felt awkward, but filled with a quiet, shared understanding. So, he said, his voice a little steadier. You get it. The feeling like the house is too quiet sometimes. Yes, I admitted, especially on days like today. He took another sip of his coffee, seeming to relax fractionally against the back of the chair. The rain outside seemed less intrusive now, more like a gentle backdrop to the unexpected intimacy unfolding within my living room. He hadn't just brought the rain inside, he'd brought a shared humanity, a vulnerability that resonated deeply with my own. We sat in silence for a while after that, but it was a different kind of silence. Not empty, but contemplative. It felt companionable, strangely comfortable given we were practically strangers just an hour ago. Mark seemed lost in thought, his gaze distant, but the tension had eased from his shoulders. I found myself studying him discreetly. The lines etched around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hand as he held the coffee mug, the way his quietness seemed less like aloofness now, and more like a protective shell built over years of solitary grief. I wondered about Clara, about the life they'd shared in that house down the street. 15 years was a long time to hold on to sorrow alone. Did you two live in that house together? I asked softly, breaking the quiet spell. I worried I might be overstepping, but the shared vulnerability seemed to invite a gentler kind of curiosity. He looked up, seemingly unsurprised by the question. We did. he confirmed, a faint, nostalgic smile touching his lips. Bought it just after we got married. Fixed it up ourselves, mostly. She loved the garden. His eyes drifted towards my window again, perhaps picturing his own garden, the one Clara had loved. She had this incredible knack for making things grow. Roses mostly, old, fashioned ones with names I could never remember. The whole backyard smelled amazing in the summer. He spoke about her with a quiet reverence, a mixture of love and enduring sadness. I could almost picture her, tending her roses, her presence filling the house that now stood silent. That sounds lovely, I said sincerely. Mike David was the gardener here. I try my best, but mostly I just manage not to kill things. He chuckled softly, a genuine sound this time. It warmed the room slightly. Clara used to say I had a black thumb, couldn't even keep a cactus alive. We talked a little more then about gardens and the neighborhood, about how things had changed over the years. It was easy conversation, flowing naturally from the shared ground we discovered. He asked about David, about my children, listening attentively as I spoke about them, my voice catching slightly when I mentioned how much I missed the noise they used to make in the house. He didn't offer platitudes or easy comforts, just listened with a quiet empathy that felt more genuine than any well-meaning condolences I'd received. He understood the landscape of loss in a way few others did. As we talked, I noticed the subtle shift in him. He seemed less burdened, the rawness I'd seen earlier softening into a quiet melancholy. Sharing his story, even just fragments of it, seemed to have lightened the load, if only slightly. The rain began to ease, the frantic drumming softening to a more gentle patter. The gray light outside seemed a fraction brighter. Mark glanced towards the window again. Looks like it might be letting up soon, he observed. Maybe I should think about that, locksmith. There's no rush, I said quickly, surprised by my own reluctance to see him go. The unexpected connection had filled the lonely afternoon in a way I hadn't anticipated. Unless you need to get back. He shook his head. No, like I said, nothing urgent. He paused, looking at me thoughtfully. Thank you, Eleanor, for the coffee, for listening. It's been a long time since I talked about Claire. The rain eventually subsided to a fine drizzle, the clouds thinning enough to let a watery, late afternoon light filter through. Mark finally decided it was time to call the locksmith. I found the number for a local company, and he made the call, his voice calm and matter-of-fact now, arranging for someone to come out. He thanked me again as he hung up, a genuine warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there when he first arrived, drenched and distressed. They said it might be about an hour. He told me, standing up and stretching slightly, I should probably head back, wait for them outside. You don't have to stand out there. I protested. You can wait here. Have another coffee. He smiled, a proper smile this time that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. Thank you, Eleanor, but I think I'll be okay now. A little fresh air might do me good after being cooped up. He picked up the broken key pieces. And maybe I'll take a walk past the cemetery afterwards, if it stays dry enough. I didn't get to go this morning, but maybe the afternoon's not too late. There was a quiet determination in his voice, a sense of purpose restored. It felt like our conversation. The simple act of sharing his grief and having it acknowledged had helped him navigate the emotional hurdle of the day. He went to the hallway to retrieve his still damp jacket. As he put it on, he paused, turning back to me. Eleanor, he began, then hesitated, searching for the right words. Today was difficult. Showing up on your doorstep like that, I wasn't myself. Thank you for being so kind, for not just seeing a clumsy neighbor, who broke his key. "Mark," I said softly, meeting his gaze. "We all have days like that. Days when we need someone to just open the door. I'm glad I was here." He nodded, a flicker of that earlier vulnerability crossing his face, but this time overlaid with gratitude. "Me too." He opened the front door, and a wave of cool, damp air washed into the hall, smelling clean and earthy after the rain. The sun was even trying to break through the clouds in the west, casting long, weak shadows across the wet pavement. "Well," he said, stepping onto the porch, "I guess I'll see you around, neighbor." "See you around, Mark," I replied, a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the coffee. I watched him walk down the path, his shoulders straighter now, his stride more purposeful. He turned at the sidewalk and gave a small wave before heading towards his house. I closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, the quiet of the house settling back around me. But it felt different now, less empty, more peaceful. The encounter had been unexpected, yes, but profoundly human. No grand drama, no unbelievable twist in the conventional sense, but a quiet unfolding of shared experience, mutual respect, and the surprising comfort found in simple kindness. It was a reminder that connection can bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, often when we least expect it, but perhaps need it most. Looking around my living room, at the 2 coffee mugs still sitting there, I felt a sense of quiet growth. The loneliness that had clung to me earlier seemed to have receded, replaced by a gentle sense of hope. Maybe the next chapter wasn't about grand adventures or new romances, but about these small, significant connections, about opening the door, literally and figuratively, to the people sharing the same small patch of the world. The rain had stopped. Outside, I could hear a bird tentatively starting to sing. And for the first time in a long time, the quiet didn't feel like an absence, but like a space waiting to be filled, gently, with whatever life might bring next. The unexpected neighbor, the broken key, the shared hour on a rainy afternoon. It wasn't earth-shattering, perhaps, but it had shifted something within me, leaving behind a quiet resonance, reminder of the enduring power of simple, human connection.